Oh, we appear to be live somewhere because I'm getting some chat coming through.
There we go.
Hey, it's
Hey,
us. Look at that.
stuff on delay as we look through. Hello, Luke. So I look at YouTube. Stuff on delay as we look through. There we go. Hello, Luke. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's the feedback. Muting us
Yeah,
all.
there we go. So fantastic. We are live for the first time. Well, hello to everyone who's here, but most importantly, let's roll the intro. There's only one place for the breaking news in the world of instructional design. The ID Update with Tom and Joe. All the news you never knew you never needed. Only on IDT. Well, that went well for the very first time.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, hello, my name's Tom, and this... We'll practice this better,
Hi.
guys, don't worry. This, the other person...
It's Joe. Hi. Hello there. We're still working on this.
Absolutely, absolutely. So those of you who have tuned in, you've tuned in to the first of our monthly ID updates. Yes, I just to address one comment that's coming straight away from Luke. The beard is a lot bigger than when you last saw it. This is what 3 consecutive lockdowns and tier 4 living looks like in Swindon. But yes, so the ID update. The ID update is our new monthly show where we'll be talking about all things instructional design. I know, definitely not what you'd expect from something with that imaginative title, I know. We're going to talk about the big news, the little news, and as we sort of suggested, all the news no one ever needed to know about the instructional design and edtech world. One bit before we get started. We really want this show to be shaped by the people who enjoy it, and one thing that we're not sure on is time zones. So today we're obviously coming 8 p.m. UK time, but Joe is over in the States. So what time is it with you?
It is 1:03. Getting
I'm
specific.
guessing in the afternoon and not the morning.
Oh yeah, in the afternoon. Wow, all this talk about time zones, and I totally forget AM and PM is a thing. So it's
That's
1
right.
p.m. here in Colorado.
Cool. So we'd love to hear from people in the stream or afterwards. Where are you? What time zone works for you? Do you wish this was later, earlier? I would say a different day, but to be honest, Fridays work quite well for us, and we're the ones doing the show, so you know.
Yeah.
So, without any further ado, let's jump into today's headlines. I've got 2 headlines for today. The sad, official, and final passing of our good friend Flash, and remote learning in schools and universities. I'll tell you what, let's jump out the gates with the official death rather of Flash. Joe, why don't you take the lead on this?
Sure. So the story goes in 2017, Adobe came out and said, "Hey, you know what? We're kind of done with Flash." And part of that came from the fact that pretty much every time there was a major security breach, it was through Flash. So they just said, "We're done with that." Technology on the interwebs ultimately was able to just do what Flash did anyway through some crafty JavaScripting and whatnot. We got HTML5 that is pretty much the replacement for Flash. Jim Carrey had a really cool website that showed it, and then he took it down. It was really sad. But yeah, so as of December 31st, it is all super not supported by Chrome. That's the only one that people cared about, which is kind of funny. It didn't even come up in conversation that Safari eliminated Flash in January of 2020. Like the fact that that wasn't news to anybody just pretty much shows that nobody uses Safari.
They're like 4 users really aren't going to care, are they? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
Pretty much. So, but Windows updates, a recent Windows update completely kills Flash in its entirety from Windows. Google had it removed recently. Firefox had an update on the 21st or the 12th, something with those 2 numbers. And they've removed it as well. So pretty much everything is gone. I have found one place that I can play the old Flash games through an emulator. But that is the high level end of Flash. I don't know, Tom, if you want to. I was thinking that we can commemorate by pouring one out as per. what we do, but I'm gonna let you
Absolutely.
be the driver of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a bit of a weird one, Flash. For as long as kind of computers and the internet have been around, it's been Flash based. That's been the pretty much the one constant is there's always Flash. If
Mhm.
everything else doesn't work on your platform, Flash will work.
Yup.
Except now it doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
so it's a bit of a killer, really. I know it is outdated, it is old, but it's always it's kind of the end of an era feeling to it. Um,
Yeah. I was raised on Flash. I went to school for multimedia and web design. Um, for that was I did it for 2 years, and
hmm.
it was Flash, 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 and I hated it. By the way, I find it, I even now,
Oh, it's
even
horrible to work
it was
with.
archaic at the time. But I started when it wasn't an Adobe product, right? It used to be
Mm.
Macromedia. It was Macromedia Shockwave was the platform, and they produced Flash.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah.
but so it
That's
was but if anything, I just remember all the games, all the
mm.
little games. I found like I said, I found the archive in the emulator as I was doing a little research on this topic, and there was a little game called Something Fishy, where you were a little fish that tried to just chomp bigger fish while not getting eaten on your own. Um, and I spent like a half hour that I should have been working on it.
Yes, yeah. And that maybe make most workplaces aren't going to really care that that side of Flash is dead. At least I don't think they're probably quite glad to see the end of that. But
Yeah.
I think we kind of forget just how much of the internet was based on Flash. So I agree. Let's have a beer for Flash. I have gone for a German wheat beer. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the name because I'll make myself sound like an idiot. But it's delicious. It's very, very nice. What have you got going today?
So I told you before this, you were probably gonna like both the can as well as the glass, and I'm pouring this bad boy
Mm.
in. I'm a nerd, by the way. Everyone's gonna figure that out. So the beer, Odd 13's codename Superfan.
Hmm,
So it's very superhero-y.
that's cool.
Yes. Hazy IPA as well. I'm a big fan of the hazy IPAs. This one doesn't try to do anything weird. If you live in Colorado, by the way, everything we do with our beer, we try to do something weird with it. Um, but to add to this, as I pour this out here, I'll see if this even shows up on camera with the worst pour I could have made.
Oh dear.
Um, let's see if you can see it. You might see that I also have a Power Rangers mug that I etched myself. That's the Power Rangers lightning bolt.
Oh dear. I guess before we dive back into Flash, then, if you could be any Power Ranger, which Power Ranger would you be?
Oh, I guess there's a couple ways to answer that, right? I can go for straight up power, which is usually any red Power Ranger because he always gets the cool stuff. Or I can say I kind of want to have a career after I'm done being a Power Ranger, and that means I'm the Green Power Ranger. Because Jason David Frank is making millions off of just going to conventions and never having another role that he's recognized for.
Well, I must say your Power Ranger knowledge vastly outmatches mine.
I just stayed
Well,
in the OG. We can talk about the 27 following seasons if we want to,
dear
and
me,
I will never be invited back here again.
absolutely not. That's no, but I see actually there's some comments coming about Flash actually. So do you feel like it's worth working with Animate and HTML5 Canvas, or is there another tool to execute animations? And that's really interesting actually, because I kind of made some notes to talk about what are the new alternatives, and certainly Adobe is going to push Animate.
Mhm.
And the HTML5 canvas, and I mean I'm not an animator to massive banner over the top of that, web or MP4 or otherwise. However, I dipped my toes in Animate, and actually, compared to working in Flash, it's really quite nice. It felt
Nice.
terrible, like Flash is dying, we should all feel bad for it, but actually, it was old, a security risk, a pain to work with, and the replacement is so much simpler. So I mean, I think Adobe Animate HTML5 Canvas are going to be the go-to replacements because it's effectively a like for like replacement there. from the Adobe perspective, they've gone from Flash Animator to Adobe Animate, and they've been phasing that in for years now.
Mhm.
So a lot of people already, in terms of the user interface end of it, there's no difference.
Mhm.
Same for a lot of e-learning designers, really, which is why I never really got the massive, "Oh, it's going to completely reshape the industry." I was like, is it? I'm just going to click a different button when I publish something. Um,
Right.
it's,
Yeah.
I think for probably 90% of us, that is the only change, is we've noticed one option disappear when we publish something, whether it's SCORM or web-based or XAPI. We've just got one less option for publishing. Um, which does beg the question how so many people are making so much money republishing courses, um, which has been an interesting,
Man, I
interesting
did
one.
on that note, there was a webinar when it was first announced. It was first announced in 2017. People didn't really care until about mid 2018, so they did like the full announcements. And around like early 2019 is when you started seeing the banner at the top. Um, I forgot the name of the company did this webinar that said we're going to do a webinar on how to convert Flash into HTML5, and it was like awesome because when I worked at when I worked at Epsilon, we had all Flash, so I was like, this is going to be great for us. And what we got was a half hour of here's why it's important, and a half hour of here's how to reach out to our company so we can do it for you. I was like, you suck. You are. It's that classic bait
Yeah.
and switch. It's like it was like a timeshare, right? Man, you're just. I feel so jazzed about this cool thing that's going to save me so much time and effort. I just gotta give money to you. This is not a webinar on how to convert at
That's
all.
well,
I was
neither's
so
this,
mad.
in fairness, but we never build it to be such. We build it as news and beer, and so far we have had news and beer. End of
Uh-huh.
stream. Good night. Uh, so, but yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much conversation about it now. Usually, when something like this happens, by the time you get to it, it's almost old news. I think this
Yeah.
one's a bit different, partially because of how fundamental it's been in, anything internet based, but also because so much of this has happened or been led in ways that are pay me to do it, pay me to do it, pay me to do it. And now all of a sudden businesses are going, so what happens when we need to create something new and we want to do it ourselves? Which is why I thought David's question was so good there, actually about alternatives. And I mean, the one really great thing is that there have been a lot of alternatives moving away from Flash for a long time because Flash was an Adobe product. A lot of open source software already avoided it.
Mhm.
Because they had to go through, even if they were going to use it from an open source basis, Adobe aren't exactly generous with their rights. It might shock you to learn with their incredible licensing agreements.
Yeah, even Captivate,
Um,
thankfully. Oops, sorry.
yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah, even Captivate when they did their updates, even in 9, even Captivate 9, which is the one most people are stuck with if you don't have a training budget, gave brought in that HTML5 option.
Yeah.
So thankfully people weren't terribly screwed. I do worry about those companies that lost their training teams in COVID
Mm.
that didn't really get the time to convert because they're kind of archaic. Like I've seen enough ID positions that just rolled in from people who just needed somebody to handle the training work. And I'm like, oh man, if you did so much of your stuff in Flash, if you had an ID or a trainer before that you got rid of for like 3 years, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Um,
It's that interesting. That's what got a lot of messages in the last month or so that have been, we've got this stuff. We don't know if it's got Flash in it. Um, because actually, once it's published, if you aren't a tech person, how are you going to find out if all you've got is the published files and you don't know what SCORM is, let alone the difference between Flash, HTML, or whatever else it might be in there?
right.
You don't stand a chance, really. Certainly not in able to be able to change it if it is Flash. But that's why
Yeah.
I was so pleased when we were talking about this topic beforehand to find emulators and kind of sandbox replacements popping up all over the place because people are so desperate to hang on to Flash. I know
Yeah.
we sort of found Ruffle being a Rust-based emulator,
hmm Yeah, I got
which
introduced to Ruffle.
yeah, that's it's cool and it's free, and you can carry on using Flash if for some reason you desperately want to. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'd
That game
advise
site
it.
that I went on used Ruffle.
Mm.
So every
Oh,
game that I had, which was just, you know, my childhood reimagined, was all Ruffle, 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 Ruffle.
yeah, but
Or
but
Ruffle if you're a
it's
potato chip fan.
there we go. Um, but yeah, I think it is probably quite a big change for the industry. I think especially for those who maybe work in the raw level of code and design. I think for those using tools, as we said, it's clicking a different button at the end. But that
Right.
conversion piece in the meantime, I suspect there is going to be a lot of business out there for anyone willing to take calls going, everything has stopped working and we don't know why. Um,
And as someone who does occasional freelance work, I'd like to let those people know I do not want to do any of it. Please don't reach out to me.
no, absolutely, absolutely. It's the kind of work that I think would just make you want to just quit and go and be unemployed for a bit. Um, but I know we were talking before about places we didn't expect to find Flash and the impact of it just suddenly stopping, and you found a hilarious story about it.
Yeah, so let's see if I got here we go. I had to get I'm pretty sure I'm gonna botch the name of this. Um so apparently and gosh, I'm hoping that I don't get a random audio when I click on this. So apparently there was a when Flash ended, there was a Chinese railroad, city of oh, here we go. It's even spelled like normal, Dalian. So I want to say Dalian, but that doesn't sound very Chinese to me, and I apologize. I just that's that seems like I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I'm going to go with Dalian. Their entire railroad system ran on Flash. So when Flash died, their entire railroad system stopped. Why they were using Flash, why they were using the same system that like online casinos use to do business is beyond me. But yeah, they were the that railroad system was ground to a halt for 20 hours according to the article. Um, Railroad technicians did everything to get back, get themselves back up and running. Um, but here's where it gets real sweet. So instead of like converting systems or anything, the engineers behind the system, the engineers who were running the railroads, installed a pirated version of Flash in order to keep going. They didn't even like try to migrate or anything. They just found some knockoff version of Flash that was still running. And as far as I know, they're back up and running in an even worse way, in the way that I used to steal Photoshop software um, before I had money.
That's pretty insane, really, isn't it? That's But I
Like,
suppose, hey, if it works, if you need to get your trains moving, you don't have the option of a 6-month contractor coming in and milking it to redesign your slides for you. There's less of a choice with that, I suppose, compared to us.
what I didn't
Um,
look at is where this is. So where are they? So it looks like forget how. So there's the peninsula kind of on the southwest or on the west. So basically you've got China, there's North Korea, and there's this little peninsula that kind of sticks out, and that's where Dalian's at. Um,
hmm.
so it's
So,
not near anything major.
but probably a train system to avoid using. That's a train system that they clearly intend to leave running on Flash.
Yeah.
That's but hey, that's fine. But I think it does in a weird way show that Flash was actually so much more than funny animations on the internet. It's genuinely useful, capable of a lot, and just kind of outlived its value.
I
Um,
only remember it from video games as a kid and having to hit like the glorious F6. There was a permanent indent in F6, which was the add keyframe button in old Flash in creating that. Um, but yeah, it runs trains, guys. And for
there we
some reason
go.
they got rid of it. Darn you, Adobe.
I know, right? That's but that is the death of Flash. It is, for better or worse, big news for us as an industry and for tech. In fairness, it's a big shake up for tech.
Mhm.
Um, so our second headline for today um, is less of an individual story and more of a topic that certainly I think everyone's become very aware of. And that is remote learning in schools and universities. And you know, it applies to workplaces as well, but I think it's drawn starkest when we look at schools and universities, especially for parents who are suddenly, well, now you're a teacher. Um, or for the elements in the industry that have often said, it's the same skill, just take it online.
Right.
And there have been those of us for quite a while going, Not really. You've misunderstood some elements there." And I read a really interesting article, which is what sparked this really to be a specific headline today. And the article was published just earlier this month, actually. And I'll pop a link to the Education and Tech Research journal that I found it in. But it basically outlined the struggle that teachers are going through in redesigning content, right the way from the learning objective level to bring it online. And it's something I hadn't thought about before, and I thought it was really interesting that their feedback was basically that in a classroom, you can have very broad, very general learning objectives because you're going to have a conversation. Things are going to
Mhm.
develop over an hour of back and forth. You can't do that when you're designing online learning.
Right.
If you realistically, first of all, no one's doing a 1 hour piece of e-learning. I don't care how good you think it is, no one does it. Um, either they don't log in at all, or they find the quickest clickable route to the end course button. And that goes for instructional designers as much as it does for end users, to be honest. But the idea that you have to completely go back to the syllabus and say, how do we break this down, much as we do in the corporate world, to key actionables rather than these kind of very broad level understanding objectives. I just thought it was so interesting, and it got me thinking. And maybe you've got some input on this, Joe. Learning, certainly in the UK, has almost been put onto a back burner. Education isn't the most important thing.
Mhm.
Whether it's work experience is more important, or getting hands on is more important, and those things of course are important, but maybe there's been a little bit too much emphasis put on that and not enough on learning.
Yeah,
Just wondering
in the
your thoughts.
States, the news has been weird. And I mean, I'm not in academia. I haven't really worked in it. I haven't been a teacher or anything. But I remember like beginning of 2020, or beginning of the quarantine and beginning of all of that, the lockdowns in 2020, there was all this, who are we going to educate? Who are we going to educate? How are we going to educate people? And
Mm,
it just kind of faded into, we're just going to throw this year away. And that still is what it kind of feels like even now as we get into February of this year. This is like the year that was lost. Um, Standards went out the window because it was just survival mode. Now, I don't know exactly if this is true. I haven't talked to a ton of teachers, but I definitely haven't seen a big push from a news perspective of how are kids learning more than are we okay with just calling this one a wash? Here are the struggles that teachers are having. I haven't seen anything about regarding grades or
mm,
um graduation rates, anything like that. It just feels like it's just not coming up. I haven't seen a single article. I didn't see a single article talking in March on what happened to those who were ready to graduate outside of the sadness of not being able to do it in person, and the virtual ceremonies. But like, what about those grades and those test scores? uh I don't have that insight. So if for the viewers out there, if you are a teacher, I know that's something I would love to see. Of
mm.
is it as serious? Are you really being held to like the grades of students, and or is it just get through this and try to figure it out until we can get back into the classroom, and then we'll turn to business as usual?
Yeah, and I must admit, I do wonder, because I don't think I don't want the segment to become too pandemic-y.
Mhm.
But looking beyond the current situation, I don't think there will ever be a prolonged period of business as usual again.
Mhm.
There certainly won't be in the corporate world. Already, certainly here in the UK, we've got a lot of businesses saying get rid of the office, we clearly don't need it,
Mhm.
or massively downsize the office, people can work from home. And I don't think obviously schools are going to do that, but
No.
every piece of considered advice, every bit of scientific evidence tells us this is not going to be a one-off. As horrible as that is to hear, things are like this are going to happen again.
Mhm.
That's the environment that ultimately has been created. Um, and I
Yeah.
think Luke brings up a fantastic point in the chat, that he's heard the knock-on impact of education. It could last for years.
Yeah.
And I think that will go for the students, obviously, but also the educators. Um,
Yeah, there's a comment in Twitch, and JD, I apologize, I don't know your first name, so I'm just going with JD. So as a teacher, we're still trying to make the school year as normal as possible. I think there's a lot of ground on that. Is
mm,
it? I think to your point originally of the the candid conversation with kids and knowing that you're just going to be an open free thing with everybody in the room. I don't think you can do that virtually, so I'm really curious about that normal as possible and what are the sacrifices you make between communication and education, because when I was a kid, that's all that we had, was the two had to work together
yeah.
for me to learn anything, or more importantly for me to care about anything. um
And I think that's it. In the corporate world, we sometimes take it for granted that people have an inherent buy-in to do a course. You're paying them to. It's their job. Do it or get out. Is no matter how much ID doesn't like that to be the reason we're going to engage people and get them to want to learn, they've got to do it anyway. So
y-
that's the worst case scenario. In a
yeah,
school,
it's one
that's
of those.
not. Sorry, go for it.
Oh, I was gonna say it's one of the wild things in that exact note of I work with, or I shouldn't say I work with. My wife is a retail manager, and so we talk about training from time to time because she has to onboard her staff, and
Ooh.
she sees as I create onboarding for the teams that come into my corporate world, and the biggest difference that is such a it changes the conversation completely is if I'm onboarding with a company, I have time designated to do that. And if I'm onboarding to a platform, I am squeezing in as much time as I can, even though I'm really trying to teach you similar information. But I have to approach it completely differently because I know that this group over here is like shoving half hour of webinar into an 8 hour day that they have 10 hours accounted for already.
Oof.
It's a wild way to go. And again, going back to the teacher thing, I can't imagine what that's like of, hey, you're stuck in a room for an hour and I have to make this interesting enough for you to stick around, um, knowing that you're trapped here. It's not, I'm learning this
Mm.
because I want to and I'm going to squeeze it into my day. So I've really got to get the most bang for my buck. It's, I'm here and I don't get to leave. I got nowhere else to go because mom will find out.
Yeah, I think that it's gonna be really interesting to see what the tail end of this could look like. And I think again, there's a point being made up in the chat that there are a lot of teachers becoming instructional designers now, leaving the
Mhm.
teaching world.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a headline for 2020.
yeah,
Um,
uh, we'll have a whole crop of new instructional designers, but perhaps a bit of a shortage on experienced teachers, which would be a shame. Not for them. You earn like several times the amount of money, arguably work far less hard. That's
right. So through the realm
certainly
of
don't.
Twitch, yep. In the world of Twitch, grading policy has not changed. They're still holding students accountable, understanding with situations, but they're not like from a teacher's perspective, they're not throwing the school year away.
That's really good to hear. And
Mhm.
I think it would be really interesting at some point actually to maybe get in as many people from the teaching world as possible and have a bit of a group chat maybe about what that's been like and how it's been done. Because I think it's going to be quite an impressive story, I should imagine.
That'd be fun,
um,
right? Little campfire
absolutely.
chat. ID people who've only worked in ID talking to teachers coming into it. I know I've seen a ton of blogs on, so you're making that transition, but I've never really sat down with like a group and kind of let teachers bounce off each other.
Mm,
Um,
it's a
that'd be kind
very
of fun.
yeah. I say I've worked with a couple of schools this year who have wanted some help from a technical perspective, moving things online, putting together, streaming kits and learning to facilitate to a camera lens rather than a room of kids, that kind of thing.
They have any
Um,
flash courses?
yes, but it it's a very, I kind of assumed there would be a very common language, and I was kind of surprised how many things were the same but different at every
Mhm.
stage of the process. Because when we both started talking about blooms and learning objectives, I thought, right, yes, we're going to be very much aligned. Everything beyond that point was different. um,
Right.
through kind of I mean, even just the use of things like, oh, and now we're talking about the syllabus, and the syllabus isn't the content, the syllabus is something else that I could never quite get to grips with. And it was yeah, I'm sure teachers probably hear that and think, oh, you're an idiot. But
Yeah.
but it's more different than I had expected it to be. So yeah, I think a group chat of that would be really interesting. If you see this and would like to be involved, give us a shout. um because
Maybe a
it'd be really interesting, really interesting.
Yeah. We actually just hired a guy who was only in academia, and now he's making that switch. So I've never, with all this talk of
Mm.
people who have done it, I've never actually had to work directly with somebody who made the switch from academia to ID. And I'm kind of helping him onboarding. I'm listening to his questions and kind of how he approaches things. I'm like, it's a bigger shift than I gave it credit for.
Yeah.
Just even the conversation of like, how do I talk to an SME? Because I've never really done that. And what does that relationship building look like? I was like,
Mm.
I could talk a day about that stuff, and it's just something that kind of came to me naturally, and I'm just it'd be kind of wild to hear. It's like, hey, teachers don't really have the luxury of an SME. They have got textbooks that they're stuck with or resources they find on their own. Um, but it doesn't really adapt. It's just this is what I found. Uh,
Yeah.
be
The
fun.
other
Be
big
fun.
thing, of course, being that idea of here's a budget. You have actual money you can spend on creating content. Um, that's that's certainly been the thing that's thrown the people that I've worked with. So I've gone, why don't we do this? And that sounds like it's going to cost money. It's like, yes, yeah, we can't do that. It's like, oh, okay, that's
And I know for teachers in the States, I know you guys will appreciate it out in the States. Part of that is also they don't really encourage you taking it out of your own pocket. Um, so just don't do that.
no, you absolutely shouldn't. But I do know a lot of teachers, spoken to a lot of teachers who have done exactly that this year. Right, rightly or wrongly. I know of a couple that have even invested in like authoring tool licenses,
Mhm.
because they just reached the point where their audience was crying out for something that wasn't okay. Everyone get on Zoom. Uh,
The
which is
rotating articulate trial.
that's no, they were very good compared to some instructional designers that shall remain
Yes.
nameless. Me, I who they would daisy chain free trials for a long period of time. It's a terrible thing to do. You should never do it. Um, these big corporations are desperately struggling,
Mhm.
and they need our revenue streams. So yeah, I think that's a topic that's likely to come up again in future. I hope it comes up again in future.
For
Get in
sure.
touch if you want to talk to us about it, because I think it would be really, really cool. Now we've got loads of small topics, as I've kind of labeled them, or what did I call that? I called it the in other news,
In
which is
other
usually when you
news.
say in other news, a dog has been spotted skateboarding down the main road. This is in other news. All the software in the world has stopped working because Articulate decided to do another update. Um, I say this
That-
because this has been my week.
yeah. Oh man. So I assume you're referring to the one that happened on the 21st, and the one that happened on the 19th, because they did an emergency update on the 19th that like apparently something happened with HTML5. If you try to upload through like a classic player in HTML5, everything just broke. Quiz result slides failed. That's something else that happened. Hyperlinks in Internet Explorer struggled. That happened. Storyline had a rough month. As all the jokes of, hey, you're 2020, this was 2020, and let us introduce you to 2021. Storyline is not far away from that. Uh,
Yep.
the other one that I caught was apparently, like, if you're viewing on like an like an iOS device, if you're viewing a mobile and you did a next slide, the audio of the course could just stop and it
Yep.
wouldn't come back.
Yeah.
It
This
was all
is
kinds of rough.
yeah. I have had a week in which I published out 13 courses.
Jeez.
Um, yeah, it was loads of fun. Um,
Yeah, and I feel bad for this because I was all excited when we started talking about this. I was all excited about talk about the December 15th update, which I'm still going to talk
yeah.
about, but it's completely been overshadowed by just the garbage that they had to fix on the
Yeah.
19th.
I think the thing that and this always comes up. Articulate is in the position that, and I'm going to be a nerdy tech person for a moment. Articulate, in my mind, has reached the point now where they are the Intel of the e-learning authoring world, or where Intel was maybe 2 years ago, really, where there is
Um,
no viable competition. No
no.
one is even close. They have massive market share in every market.
Mm.
If you're willing to pay for the tool, that's the one. If there's a job description for an instructional designer, it says must be able to use Storyline. There might be some other things in there as well, but Storyline's always first in bold, and it's the one you'll get asked about. It's in
Mhm.
every portfolio. Every course teaching you how to become an instructional designer teaches you Articulate Storyline.
I have to laugh. I have to add to that real
It's...
fast though.
Go for it.
How many interviews I went through. So I had about 5 to 6 months of unemployment in 2020. The number of interviews that I had where the job description demanded Storyline and Rise, and they didn't use Storyline and Rise. Like when you Wikipedia how to write a job description for an
Yep.
instructional designer, that's what came up. And I think at least half of them were like, hey, you must know Articulate. Cool, let's talk about your Articulate. Let's talk about your Storyline. Yeah, so we use Captivate.
Awesome.
Why bring it up? Oh,
Love it.
oh, my buddy Justice Suarez, you wait in the YouTube chat about Captivate. I'm gonna create the first controversy, I think.
Oh, we're gonna
I'm
get
waiting for it.
yeah.
We'll
You've
get
got
there.
controversy. I've got what is best described as a burning eternal hatred for the steaming pile that is Captivate. Not that I'm in any way a fan of Storyline. This is the world in which I now dwell. The horse that I backed has won the race and then shot itself in the face, it would seem. It's
But
just
Adobe, if you're
bizarre.
watching us and want to sponsor our content, like please, like we'll
I don't know,
use it.
pretty much anyone else I'm good with. I'm not sure I could do it. Having spent years going mental that I'm one of the people that bought Adobe products back when you bought Adobe products. Year after year, I would pay for the annual upgrade and own the software. And then what came along? Well, now if you want the latest versions, you're going to have to pay us every single month.
I feel like I went back to community college. Like I got my degree in graphic design, so I haven't learned anything. And I feel like I went back to community college to get like some basic degree just so I can apply for the student rate because it was cheaper to pay for college and this and get the student rate than it was to pay for Adobe products just flat out as a
Absolutely.
professional.
Yeah. It's but I but the price is never overly my issue with Adobe. It's the opportunism of the pricing, I guess, is how I would word it. But
That's fair.
that's not the current discussion. We will get to Captivate.
We will
Captivate's got
get
its
there.
own section.
I'm gonna
Back
add
to
some
my
spice.
back to my Intel comparison. So yeah, they're going along. There's no real competition. The difference being that Intel then fell down because AMD went, right, they aren't watching, and absolutely destroyed them over the course of 2 years.
Yeah.
What we
It's
need is an AMD move within the edtech space. We need someone to come along and say, you appear to be doing nothing to actually make your product work and be reliable. We can do
yeah,
that.
I remember when knowing what AMD was like so elitist. Like it was like when Linux started off. If you knew what Red Hat was, you were leaps and bounds above the industry. Apparently, even if you had no clue what to do with it, and then
Yep.
AMD shows up, and it's like, oh, it's not an Intel, it's AMD. Ooh, what's this thing? What's this AMD thing?
It was
Gotta remember that.
all of us going, oh, you run Intel. I'm an
Ooh.
AMD person. What we were actually saying was, my processor is not as good as you, but we're edgy and cool. We're Team Red.
I
Yeah.
drink IPAs.
That it was exactly that. It was a geekier, less impressive claim. Used only by those of us who got home from school, and our first thought was, right, where did I put those wire cutters? Because I need to convert that Molex to a new SATA connector when that was the big thing.
So
That's
jumping back
yeah,
into the whole point of this, though, is I really wanted to talk about the December 15th update to Articulate
we did.
storyline and ride. Because if you haven't had a chance to see it, because no tech company ever knows how to properly communicate their release notes, I wanted to provide a little of that insight as well. So I've got it for this, and I've got a Camtasia update, and hilariously, I don't have a Captivate update, and we're going to talk about that. But if on this note, for those of you watching, if there are other kind of software that you really want to use and really want to get insight and kind of up to date on, that is a part of what kind of we're hoping to bring is a little of that tech conversation. But December 15th, let's talk what happened to Articulate in December 15th. Biggest thing, freaking styles. So they actually added the ability to put style, like you can set custom styles for text elements in projects. You can set styles for, I'm going to do a block quote. So I just do block quote style, and they have all this. They basically finally, for the first time, introduced something resembling CSS back in the day, which is kind of the AMD of web design, was knowing CSS. So they did a lot more of that. They added a little bit of accessibility as well. So for those of you who are working on accessibility stuff, you can actually, they now have it in Articulate where you can, the learner can set accessibility settings. So they can change the visual experience of text. Basically, they can go bigger. I think they also included a dark mode. And that's usually a pretty big thing as well. So they added a lot more accessibility things. And then, yeah, that custom frickin' styles, they've made those easier to handle, easier to maneuver. So that's the big update with them before they broke all of it and had to do a series of fixes. More in other news, though, because I'm going to, of course, talk about my favorite Camtasia. I'm a sucker for Camtasia, and Tom's going to have to shut me up one day about it. But for those of you Camtasia guys, or for those of you international who've been struggling with it or worried about it, they have finally made themselves available in Spanish, Portuguese, and Japanese. So they've made that a lot more accessible to not the States and not English. So that's super quick release note update with those. And I'm going to steer this into, I'd love to give you a Captivate update. I would, but Captivate hasn't updated in about a year and a half. They have not had a release of any sizable kind since August of 2019. And I know you're probably saying, well, they released in 2019 and then you do little ones. In 2017, Captivate did releases, and they did releases in 2018. They did one in August 2018, and then Captivate 2019 came out. They haven't done an update since. The last release notes are little nothing hot fixes from 2 years ago. And so I can't give you anything for Captivate. But to talk more about that, that's going to lead in my spice, and I don't know if we're ready for that. So I'm going to let Tom cue me into my little...
Yeah.
If you want.
And the only thing I was going to say there was that that's unusual because Adobe, in terms of documentation, they love documentation. Like, to the point where no end user needs to see the level of documentation that's available for Adobe products.
Yeah.
And it's interesting there. Joseph in the comments saying Captivate is an afterthought for Adobe. And I'm inclined to agree. I think they're in the position where they're beat. They know they're beat, but they've got a core market. It brings in some money, so they'll just kind of leave it to chug along, basically, which is not completely unreasonable. But I know, Joe, you have a slightly different view.
I have some spice. All right, it's a theory, and I'm going to back this theory up. So this isn't me just spouting nonsense. That's a lie. This is all me spouting nonsense.
Yeah.
It's, what am I talking about? All right. So yes, Captivate. My theory is that within 5 years, Captivate will either be dead or the authoring tool will be completely rebranded into something different. Like the end of Captivate is here. And here's why I think that. Here's my logic. It has nothing to do with Captivate and the nothing burger that it's been the last year and a half, and everything to do with Captivate Prime LMS. The way that I'm looking at these dots is I'm thinking as a marketer here. If I'm a company and I like if you've done anything with if you've looked up LMSs, Captivate Prime, they've put a lot of money and effort and energy into it. If you've ever tried their free trial, it's actually a heck of a lot of good, it's a lot of fun. It's a really good tool. It is ungodly expensive. But there's a lot, they've clearly put a heck of a lot of investment, much more than this, Flash for trainers. That's basically what the platform is. The fact that that Adobe Captivate Prime exists and it's called Captivate Prime, when I look at that, when I look at a company that is using the same name for something completely different, I see that as diffusing the other market. You're literally confused. You kind of created a copyright infringement problem on yourself. You were competing against your own name, and it feels like Adobe is trying to get Captivate in line with the LMS system more than it's trying to get them in line with the authoring software. I see this from all the updates they do from Captivate LMS, all the marketing they do for Captivate Prime LMS, and the nothing that they've done with Captivate in the last year and a half, the authoring software. So I feel like they're trying to get the market to see Captivate as an LMS, to call it Captivate and be like, oh, I'm thinking of the LMS, which leads me to either one, Captivate's going to die, it's going to fizzle, they're going to appreciate that they have just lost to storyline, or they're going to go really wild and take the audience that currently uses Captivate, because it's still like a meh number 2, and they're going to completely rebrand and revitalize that software. They're going to take everything they did with kind of Animate, they're going to take everything that they're doing over on this side of the UI, they're going to completely update the experience, eliminate the Captivate name from the authoring software, call it something different, so Captivate LMS can still capture the attention of trainers and IDs, but it's going to go towards this side that they want to put money in. So that's my theory. 5 years, something's going to happen with Captivate that will signal the end of the authoring software as we know it. Boom. And with that, I'm chugging a beer.
I think that's, I mean, I would never doubt that Adobe would do something like that. Whether or not they will with Captivate, I don't know, if I'm honest. If I'm honest, I think I'd actually put my money on them killing it. They've got a lot of history of doing a bit of a Google, launching something, and if it doesn't absolutely take off the way, let's face it, most Adobe products absolutely rule the market in which they stand, whether it's Photoshop, Premiere, After Effects, they are the leading software in their field. That's kind of their ballpark. So I wonder, like the LMS, I could see that becoming extreme. Well, it's already rocketing up in terms of popularity.
It
largely
is really fantastic.
And do you know what it is more than anything else? It's simple. And that's always been my biggest gripe with LMSs. They are 1,000 times as complicated as they ever needed to be.
Exactly. So I'm looking at it. The other thing to know about Captivate, for those of you who don't have that kind of way the far history, the original idea. It was originally Macromedia. The interface is Macromedia's interface. The boxy keyframe timeline, that is a Macromedia approach to UIs. And everything around it. If you've been in Captivate, you know that they're very 90s archaic. Like the default design styles look like Windows 3.1. It's rough, but that's where Macromedia stood, and they haven't changed away from Macromedia. So you take this, they killed Flash and moved you into Animate, and I'm like, I feel like you're going to kill Captivate and do something like what you did with Flash and Animate. You're going to do something different. I don't know if I see him killing it, especially because the marketing opportunities, if market share in Prime LMS goes up, how great would it be as Adobe to be able to bundle that with an authoring software that plays very nicely with that? I don't know if I would do that.
I feel like if they were gonna do that, they would go almost down the route that Gomo went and offer like a super simple authoring tool
Mm.
that's actually built into the LMS. And so you almost don't have a choice. If you're going to use the LMS, you've got the authoring tool. It's a package deal. And
Mm.
that's much as they do with the Creative Cloud, they lock people into their platform. I
Yeah.
always say they are the Apple of the software world. Once you're in their ecosystem, you can't escape because everything slots together too perfectly. And stepping
Yep.
out of it and taking your files with you, no, 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 no. There's no legitimate reason for that. It just doesn't like you doing it. And I
Right.
think that I could see them doing. I think you would get a simpler authoring tool. You wouldn't get a competitor to Storyline as such.
Mm-mm.
You would get a competitor to Evolve and Rise and some of the simpler tools out there,
Mhm.
maybe. But similarly,
Yeah.
I suppose you could have workflow logins with the other Adobe products. So suddenly
Yeah.
you can push things directly from After Effects into your authoring tool, and perhaps
Yeah.
have some limited editing ability in them. That would be cool. That would be
Sure.
very
How do
cool.
you feel about Rise, actually? Because I remember Rise was just the hottest ticket for a while because it was super easy and responsive design was so popular for all of like 2 minutes until people realized that nobody trains on mobile. Or it's just not a thing I've seen in my industry. Um, and then lately it feels like Rise, like I've talked to a couple of companies and people are like, we're just trying to get off a Rise. Like I feel like we get trapped into the saltine cracker of authoring tools.
My personal opinion is that Rise, when I first got access to it, I thought it sucked. Too limited, too basic. I'm all
Mm.
for responsiveness, but responsiveness doesn't need to mean dull, which is what Rise offered. It was
Yeah.
very cookie cutter.
Yes.
I think I've come to soften to it slightly. Some updates that have come along have helped a lot. Recently, the ability to put video in there with closed captions has made putting
Yes.
video in Rise actually viable in a real training setting. How that wasn't there before, I don't know. It was stuff like that that was missing that blew my
Mhm.
mind when it came out because there was no
Yeah.
legitimate reason for it not to be there. They took the idea of simplicity and then confused it with lacking in functionality.
Mm.
And we see that by competitors. Anything based on the Adapt authoring framework, which anyone who's ever heard me talk about tools know that I'm a big fan of. That's open source, but then you've got tons of tools based on it. You've got everything from the Learning Pool Adapt Builder through to the Evolve authoring tool, tons and tons of stuff. And the reason is that it's feature rich, but
Mhm.
doesn't lose that responsiveness. But it's because a
Mhm.
lot of time was spent on it, and it feels to me like the first iteration of Rise was thrown out the door, and it was just bundled in with
Yeah.
360. No one
Yeah.
bought Rise, you bought Articulate 360, and then a lot of workplaces went, you've got a day to build me learning about this. What can you
Mhm.
do? And
Right.
any ID with a day, and you've got Articulate 360. What do? You do Rise.
Mhm.
You do Rise, or perhaps you use Peak and Replay to put together a screencast or something.
Yeah,
Those are your
exactly.
options. No one's reaching for Storyline with a 1 day turnaround. And that's how businesses, I think, got stuck with it. And you're right, no one is doing mobile. Mobile learning's a fantastic idea, but until every company gives every employee a mobile phone and a data allowance, it's not going to work. It's as simple as that. The average employee doesn't want to give their mobile to their workplace. It's not what it's for.
Yeah.
Um,
God, I almost did, and I was like, I have to do what with authenticate? If I want to get on my phone, I have to do what
oh,
now? No, no. So I took off my work stuff
yeah.
on my
It's
phone.
and I don't think that's unreasonable, and because a long time there was an argument of, oh yeah, but people should be willing to do that to progress in their career, and it's like people shouldn't have to. Their mobile phone is not the property of the business. The business isn't picking up the bill, so why on earth should they get to use that stuff? When
I
I
have
buy,
enough hurdles in
yeah,
my career right now. I don't need getting into my phone even when I'm not at work to be one of them.
absolutely. I think that was the big flaw of that. But yeah, for me, Rise was a flawed product. I like it more than I used to. I like it more than I used to. I really do. And I think it can be used well,
Mm.
but I don't think it often is. Yes.
Yeah. So going in the chat real quick, Luke, I totally agree with you. So Luke started his career with Captivate. I started my career with Captivate. That was my first as well. Um, I've gotten used to it. I can't exactly say that I like it, but I definitely understand. Like if I'm doing simulations, I like it a heck of a lot better than storyline. And then storyline is
Mm.
a bit of a shock. It's like going from like driving a 1980 Honda to driving a brand new like SUV, and you see what the dashboard looks like, and you're like, no, what? No, this is the mothership. I'm done.
But then part of me says, "Where's my Tesla?" Because that's
I
not
should have
storyline.
said Tesla. I knew
No,
it was gonna
no, no. I
happen.
think that would be pushing it a bit. Storyline's not that good. Nowhere near good enough to claim that. I could agree that it's it would be like getting a newish car, but it's not like getting a Tesla. A Tesla would reliably work when you open the software. Just that would be nice. Like when I hit publish, the file just comes out the end, and I can upload it to an LMS, and people can do the course. It'd be amazing. Um, how many hours a week I would save if that happened, just occasionally. But yeah, I think that's maybe a pipe dream. I don't know.
So all right,
Um,
so I didn't experience this, but I have to, since you brought that up, I have to bring it up as well. So I pulled up the stuff for December 15th, and I knew what happened on the 19th with their upload and the things that Articulate struggled with. One of the things I see in the January 19th are fixes, and I didn't have this happen. But here's the language. When using the modern player style, the volume slider could move erratically, or the menu scroll bar could extend below the menu panel. I didn't experience this, but that's nuts.
this is it. This was not. They weren't deploying some new crazy features that went wrong. Basic core functionality suddenly decided to just not bother. Um,
Guys.
I mean, the flip side is that the client that I was working for uses a lot of very, very high level kind of animation in their content. And it's
Mhm.
lovely to work on. It's the kind of content you dream about getting your hands on. So it's always
Right.
nice whenever I'm doing it. But I'll never be able to look at those courses again, ever. Um,
Oh,
because of the just hours of, you would export it and it would seem to be okay, and then it wouldn't be. And so you'd re-export it and that error was fixed, but then something else was going wrong. It's those kinds of things that I do worry about when very established tools start doing stuff like that. It's kind of the time that they know that no one is going to leave and
yeah.
go somewhere else. Their customer base is going nowhere, regardless of how many issues they cause. And that kind of complacency isn't good for us. We need
Yeah.
a competitor to keep the other person on their toes. When Storyline was up and coming, its big thing was, "Oh, Captivate's so buggy. Captivate never
Mhm.
gets updated. Look at us, ha ha ha." What happened? It's
Yeah.
it's painful to watch, but
They're
eh,
still on top. At the end of the day, they're still going to win. Adobe could capitalize on this stuff, but they won't. And
no.
I still think I'm close. I'm going to be vague, and I think one of those two things are going to happen. But I do see the end of Captivate. But yeah, me and Storyline are not nearly as much of friends. In the ID review that we also did, that was a
Yeah,
heck of a lot of fun. One of the trends that I said that I think is happening, I'm still sticking to it, man. I'm still sticking to it, is that we're going to see the rise of new little things, little tools, little tech. I really hope that happens. And
love
I'm gonna
that.
pad the bill to our viewers and be like, hey, if you're using little tools and little tech, come on over. And let me know what you're using. And Luke is also spot on this, which makes me even feel a little better. Can't do storyline on Mac. Hmm.
That's
I
because
don't like this.
no one with an ounce of self-respect should regularly use a Mac. That's why.
You saw how much of a struggle it was to get my Mac. It's because I don't use them.
Yep. And but I think
Just
the
take that out of the screen.
yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. We were talking the other day. I recently purchased one at the request of a client because they are a
Yep.
pain. But I I don't know. It's on the wall. I've loaded it and logged in and opened the file they sent me. I don't know when I'll use it again, if I'm honest. Um, But this comes from someone who runs Linux as their primary operating system. I'm sorry, I'm that guy.
Oh, you're that guy. You're that guy, that elitist. That's
Have you considered switching to Linux? It offers so much better privacy control. When that's your priority when setting up a new computer, privacy control, you know you've probably got a problem. But we are we've smashed through an hour actually. Which was our
yeah.
original kind of, we're going to try and keep this to about an hour because people won't want to listen to us for more than an hour. And usually after an hour of drinking beer, although I haven't actually finished one. This has been more interesting than
Oh
mini
shoot.
combos.
I forgot this is a 16-ounce can, and I thought I finished, and I thought I was done. I totally forgot. It's a 16-ounce can. So I will have to finish that
Hey.
off. It's gonna take 10 minutes for it to settle.
Yeah, but just before we go, then there are some things that we want to have in this show moving forwards. Obviously, Joe's mentioned tech, the cool little tools that, let's face it, they're taking over the internet one by one. The Internet of Things is making so many cool things possible. I watched a video this morning where a guy got code from a group of internet guys to make his Christmas tree lights do random things, and he just
Cool.
allowed anyone to remotely log in and control what his tree did over Christmas. That's awesome.
That'd be fun.
This is, and what I'd love to hear is people who are using this kind of boom in internet connectivity. How are we bringing that into the ID world? Don't come to me and say VR because I'll laugh at you.
Next episode.
Absolutely. But we also want to use this show to focus on cool things that other IDs and learning designers are doing. Whether it's blogs, YouTube channels, I don't know, interpretive dances on the streets, whatever, really.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Go for it.
No, I wasn't taking over. I could take. I wasn't taking over. Just like, yeah, if you want to do interpretive dance, it'd be super cool. This is email.
We'll have you on the show. It's a new medium for delivery. But yeah, we'd love to feature things and point people in the direction of great content going on. So do get in touch. This show, as you said, will be here every month, assuming we don't receive a slew of messages saying, "Oh, for the love of God, please don't do that ever again." We will try and cover some major topics. We'll keep bringing the tech stuff back in, and then hopefully content from you guys out in the wider world will help pad it out and give us a bit more to talk about.
Yes, join us.
Absolutely.
Or if you say we want to pay you full time to do this every 2 weeks because we love you and we'll give you extra beer also. I'm cool with that. I know I am.
I mean, absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure what your hourly rate is, but mine's going to about triple if someone offers to.
Yeah.
But no,
We'll
both of us do have YouTube channels, though. Joe, yours is?
Mine is Training is Blank. So for you instructional designers who are getting into the graphic design and the production side of things, that was a big thing in 2020. Do I need to know graphic design in order to be an instructional designer? I got a whole blog that talks about a whole lot of things, as well as a cool episode with Mr. Tom over here, who has his own thing.
Yes, so chances are you're watching this on IDT, either the Twitch channel or the YouTube channel. So, just hit subscribe before you go, basically. There's loads of new stuff coming up. Obviously, there are more shows like this. We've also got a series coming up where we look at cool gear that IDs can use or, like me, purchase and not use nearly enough. We've got some learning science episodes coming up where we look at some of our favourite and least favourite and thoroughly debunked but still surviving theories. Loads and loads of stuff coming up, really. We'd appreciate your input on the channels, of course. And Joe, I know you've got a second non-ID related channel, don't you, that I've been enjoying a lot.
Oh, really? Okay. So for you nerds out there, for those of you guys who are all into the gaming and whatnot, yes, thank you, Luke. I was gonna actually, quick side off. I was gonna say I was at 49 subscribers before this. I was like, hey, help me get to 50. So thank you, Luke. I appreciate that. 50 subscribers on Training is Blank. I also am I'm a big card gamer as well. As we were talking kind of about Articulate, just really putting kind of people last. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of Wizards of the Coast and what they did to Magic the Gathering players in 2020.
Yes.
It is literally the same thing. But I have a channel called Decks and Drafts where I just play card games and chat beer. But one of the other things I do with that is I also talk about marketing. I have a decade in marketing, on top of about a decade in instructional design. So I do a lot of, I pay attention to the market stuff. It's why I'm looking at Adobe the way that I am. So yeah, I chat about different card games and the marketing things and how communities are growing. So Decks and Drafts is that channel. I guess I can throw a link to that in the comments, but it is much less professional than this. It's me in a t-shirt with beer, probably swearing a lot. But it's also fun if you're a gamer.
Whereas, as you could tell, this was a thoroughly professional operation.
Yeah, totally. 100%. It's 100% professional.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's Friday. It's the last Friday of the month. And that's exactly where you will find us in future as well. Thanks ever so much, everyone, for tuning in. We hope to obviously speak to you all between now and next month. But if not, we will see you then. In the meantime, let's roll the outro.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
There's only one place for the breaking news in the world of instructional design. The ID Update with Tom and Joe. All the news you never knew you never needed.